Hi, Pat.
Happy New Year. Not sure if you can hear me. Hello, everyone.
Yes, Happy New Year to you too.
Happy New Year.
Yes,
We can hear
Happy
you,
New Year.
and we are live now.
Okay, well, it's not. I don't have 6 yet, so a couple
I got
more
a
minutes.
couple minutes too. Let me know when you want me to start the webinar.
Okay.
Jeremy, I think I'm on here twice. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I see you twice. Only one video though. Pat, you're
Okay,
signed on your phone, are you?
No, I'm not on my phone. I'm on my laptop.
I just want to make sure that that one's muted. I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out which one I'm closing out.
Pat, would you mute?
That one, I think you.
That was feedback.
Okay.
Oh, I think she got rid of the other one, so let's ask her to unmute and we'll see if we still have that terrible sound. Pat, would you unmute?
I will unmute.
Okay, you had a terrible sound before, but it's gone now. John, I have 6 now.
Hi, Happy New Year.
Hi,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give it 2 more minutes. 6:02, 6:03.
To start the webinar or to
Oh
start
no,
the
no,
meeting?
you can start the webinar. We'll start the meeting in.
Okay, I just want to let the guests in,
Got it.
and we should start to see attendees populate. Hopefully we have a bunch. There we go.
Hi, Cynthia.
So Jeremy, what I see on my screen, I've got now about 23, 24 some odd people. Those are the panelists, or we also have.
Yeah, there are 3 attendees, 4 attendees.
Okay.
Folks, we'll be starting in a couple of minutes. We're just letting a few more people join.
Kevin and Richard, just want to ask, do you have any slides that you wanted to show?
Hi, John. Yes, I'll be sharing a PowerPoint, which is an abbreviated version of what we presented to you.
Okay.
Kevin, I have to make you a co-host in order to do that, but I will wait to do that right now.
Yep.
Okay, Jeremy, we have how many from the committee? Do you know offhand, or in terms of board members?
Uh,
Yeah, I know we gotta break your wall.
Oh,
You did.
Oh, okay. I think-
Doing pretty well with board members. You want me to call it?
Yeah, let's go ahead and
Oh,
call.
babe.
it.
Oh, shit. I guess it's us.
So I'm going to mute everybody.
It's not pain.
And board members, we're all a little out of practice. We haven't done this in a month. But when I call your name, please unmute yourself, acknowledge that I've called your name, and then mute yourself again. That's only going to be for committee members. If you were a board member, but not a committee member, I will note your attendance, but I'm not going to call your name. So let's start with John Fontillis. You got to unmute, John.
I am here.
Thank you. Nicholas Azadian.
Present.
Thank you. Sandra Alfonso.
Present.
Thank you. Joan Body.
Here.
Thank you. Cynthia Gonzalez.
Present.
Thank you. Kenny Guan. Zachary Jacey. Christina Lem. Jimmy Lee.
Present.
Thank you. Arelis Martinez. Antoinette Martinez. Paul Mack. Marilyn Melman. Daniel Murphy. Karen Rolnick.
Here.
Thank you. Katie Walsh.
Present.
Thank you. Fred Wolf. John, that's the end of the committee list. Board members, again, if you are, oh, I'm sorry, Cesar Zuniga.
Present.
Thank you. John, that's the end of the committee list. Board members, if you are not a member of the committee, I will write your name down, but you're not required to attend tonight.
All right. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. We're getting ready for a very full agenda this year on the land use side. Thank you all for attending this not so cold wintry night, but certainly had to put my scarf on the way back. We have two major items tonight that we're going to discuss. The first is 341 39th Street, Brooklyn Prospect School, Brooklyn Prospect Charter School at that building on 39th Street. What I'd like to do is spend essentially the first 45 minutes on that land use item. This is a continuation of the public hearing and meeting that we had, I believe it was back in November, right? If I remember correctly. So this is a continuation because we had asked the school, we gave them a list of questions at the end of that meeting. We asked them to come back and to answer those. These were questions that were raised during the public hearing. We'd like to get their answers. And then we have a vote on the land use action for this committee, the land use committee. That will happen tonight. And as we all know, that's a recommendation to the full board for next week's meeting on Wednesday, the 19th, right? Yes, the 19th. Same time, same bat channel. So we will hand that off to the full board and they will vote on our recommendation. The second major item, we'll have a quick presentation from a group that is looking at the Grand Prospect Hall. They've gotten quite a bit of press recently in trying to organize an effort to look at that development proposal that's going through there. As you know, the Grand Prospect Hall was sold at some point last year, and portions of that building on the interior have already been altered significantly. This group is looking to try and find a way for a cultural use to continue on the site. We all know we've all been there for multiple things. The board has had meetings there. I think it's figured in everyone's life at some point, whether or not it was a wedding or a party or a bar mitzvah. So we'll have a presentation from them later on, hopefully around 6:45. Well, actually now probably around 7 o'clock, and have a discussion there for about another 45 minutes. We have one last minor item that's come up. There is a project that we approved with conditions back in 2018, I think. That's 57 Caton, which is right there at the Circle, Park Circle, at the top of Coney Island Avenue and Ocean Parkway. A new developer has submitted their plans. It's the same in terms of massing and unit count, but there are some slight differences in terms of how it meets the ground, as well as some of the amenities that development is providing now versus what the original developer proposed several years ago. So just a quick discussion on that at the end. There's no requirement for that. It's just basically a warning that we just need to keep an eye on it as it winds through. They do have essentially a permit to build, but there are some changes in terms of the submission to DC the housing, because there's an affordable housing component that we had asked for. I think there's some slight changes in that percentage. So again, we can talk about that at the end. But so without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Richard Lobel, as the representative, the counsel for Brooklyn Prospect Charter School.
Thank you, John, and members of the committee, good evening. John, just to be clear, I heard the number 45 minutes. Is the expectation that the presentation would go for 45 minutes, or that when we finish, there'd be questions and the total time would be 45 minutes?
Total time, 45 minutes.
Okay, good. So, we're prepared to run well under that, let's say 20 to 25 minutes with the opportunity to answer questions. Okay, fantastic.
Can you see my screen, Rich? And members
we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so good evening. Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel. I'm here with Brooklyn Prospect, as well as Kevin Williams and other members of the team. As you're aware, we're here for a special permit application pursuant to 7319 of the zoning resolution. We seek a special permit at BSA to facilitate the conversion of, by now, the well-known building at 341 39th Street, and to the conversion of 3 stories of this existing 10-story commercial building. And this requires a use waiver, importantly, not a bulk waiver, but a use waiver. And 7319 is a special permit. It's not a variance. Should you meet the findings of the special permit, the board is instructed to give you this special permit. So the findings are 4. The first finding, of course, is that you're located within 400 feet of a residential district. You can see from the map here, the location of the school between 3rd and 4th, and a residential district lying across 39th Street within 100 to 150 feet of the property. So we meet that finding. The second finding, or the other finding that is non-environmental related, is with regards to site selection. And after I speak for the next minute, the school can introduce themselves, say hi. There's some slides that we include with regards to site selection. Some of this material the community board has seen before, and the school is basically available to answer questions on that towards the end of the presentation. The 2 main issues that I think the community board has discussed, and which Kevin's prepared to discuss, are environmental concerns, specifically with regards to the nature of air quality in the area, and of course, traffic and the location of the school. Next slide. So again, with that, we're going to talk about the purpose and the project, the school need within this community school district for the site, an overview of the school with regards to leadership, demographics, and catchment area. This is just a general discussion about the school. Given the time constraints tonight, we're going to try to go into the environmental issues as quickly as possible. So Kevin will be discussing the air quality, traffic, and other environmental issues. With that, I would kick this over to Brooklyn Prospect, who has several members of the executive team here who could just discuss briefly their background, and then we're going to move on to Kevin. So for the school.
Hi, everyone. My name is Trisha Ward. I'm the CEO of Brooklyn Prospect and just really excited to be here. Thank you for giving us another opportunity to talk about our school and why we would love to be able to be located in Sunset Park.
Great. Thanks, Trisha. Got your name wrong anyway. So I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. I know the members of the land use committee had a lot of great targeted questions, and I think we've all appreciate the incisiveness of the questions. And so what I like to do is just go through the presentation quickly and then reserve the time if we need to go back. We have a lot of backup material as well. So the first, just to orient everybody. So currently Brooklyn Prospect has 4 locations. And basically what this map indicates is that the location in yellow at the bottom, currently there are 110 students, K-1, that would be, they're incubated at that high school that need a home. And so as a part of that, the critical part was trying to find a home within CSD. And here you can see a little bit more clearly, they would be migrating from the area in blue to the location in red. And obviously one of the major factors in terms of siting schools, and one of the, sort of discussions that we had back and forth is the question of whether or not there's school need in this school district, particularly in subdistrict 1 and 2, which is what this site straddles. And this is data from Department of Education that currently indicates the existing capacity and available seat level, and this is all for K through 5. And basically what this shows is current enrollment, the target capacity, and the availability of seats. And I've researched a lot of the background in this area over the past several years. And yes, there are some schools and proximate to this location. We provided the background on every single school in this area in the back of the slides. You'll have some schools literally 600 feet away that's got capacity in excess of 135 feet. You have one down the street that's at 87%, but every other school in this area, and we provided that backup, has a deficit in seat capacity. And then in addition to sort of just, sort of add to this point is when DOE looks at projections on student school need, seat need, they look at the pipeline of developments coming in the area. And currently there are about 1,600 that are slated to arrive by 2024. And as a percentage of those would be elementary school students. So at least within the next 4 or 5 years, the issues that Sunset Park has been handling and developing and the schools come online, even with those, there is still a significant deficits of seats indicated in the area based on DOE criteria. And so what I'd like to do here, and the school will be able to provide more information, but just hit the highlights of the school search. So, given the need of a Brooklyn Prospect to find a home for its K-1 students at Brooklyn High School, they searched primarily CSD 15. And there were several criteria. The first of all, they really did not want to have to go through a cumbersome special permit. They've done it before. They didn't want to look at a variance. They all know that this delay the time and students coming in and the cost is tremendous and you have no promise of getting approval. And so that was a main criteria. Being located in CSD was a second critical criteria. The size of the school, of course, in terms of the estimated need for the school and the type of programming that Brooklyn Prospect currently offers and is happy to provide for students and enhanced education that they receive is to have an area of a minimum of 30,000 square feet. And then, of course, critical to all of that is the ability to afford it. And as you know, one of the reasons why schools come forward and try to find locations with a 7319 special permit is because the cost in as-of-right areas are much higher, and the ability to find a footprint or an existing location to house that square footage is immensely difficult. And then the other key parts of this are the delivery of the space in time for the school to take occupancy, and having an owner that can accommodate the school and their desire and their needs. And so the newly renovated space, the location, and this community were critical for Brooklyn Prospect site selection criteria. And so now there were some questions related to the demographic profile and some of the characteristics associated with schools that you wanted us to delve into. And so, Brooklyn Prospect has a very diverse student body, 2,200 students, 6 schools, 400 educators, 13 years of operating, in this manner. And in this area, you have, a composition of all types of people, children from all sorts of income levels. Some of the components here, so their entire network has 20% IEP for an individual educational program. Currently, the Windsor Terrace location is at 6%, so that's one of their other, sort of full capacity, one of their other elementary locations. And then they assume at full enrollment 5 years from now that they would be at about 18% IEP. So that gives you a little bit of background. Now, the current location at Windsor Terrace is about 50% of the student body is in CSD and 50% is outside at proximate zip codes. It is believed and assumed that as the school grows out, that this percentage in CSD 15 would grow. And then this is basically an overview of the enrollment profile that is assumed. So as indicated right now, they have 110 K-1 students. That would grow in the first year with second grade, and then it would grow out by 2027 to a maximum of 330 students. And then what I wanted to do is discuss some of the items specifically. I think Mr. Azadian, really had some great questions about the systems that the school is looking to deploy in terms of air quality. And so here you can see the location of the envelope of the school. And here what I did is, indoor air quality is a byproduct of outdoor air quality. We know Sunset Park has a legacy of bad air quality related to the Gowanus, related to traffic in the area, related to industrial activity that's been present. And one thing that everybody should note, and I presented this to the board prior, New York City has experienced a decline in PM 2.5 and all pollutants that are tracked by DEP and Department of Health from 19.5% to now below 9% citywide, 8.9%. And what I provided here are some outdoor benchmarks. And this is from 18 years of Department of Health, DEP, air monitoring that is live and in the field and in Sunset Park and multiple monitoring locations throughout the city. New York City average in 2018 was 9.5. At City Hall, it's 8.87. South Central Park, it's at 9.1. And I basically geocoded every school in the city and kind of focused on Manhattan because this is an environmental justice issue to a lot of people, and it should be. But one of the things to note is in some of the highest income areas in Manhattan are experiencing some of the highest PM 2.5 in the city. And so just providing that as a little bit of background. And the fact is, when we come down to brass tacks, it's about what are we going to do to make sure the children are safe and they're breathing safe air. And so we had discussed MERV 13, and I provided a profile here about what MERV 13 does. And we realized that that's not enough, even though that's the most stringent standard that New York City Department of Building has for schools. And I provided a chart that indicates that minimum MERV 13 is required to screen out 90% of PM10, 85% of PM 2.5, and 50% of the smallest particles that are not even tracked of PM 1.0. So in addition to the MERV 13, Brooklyn Prospect is already deploying in all of their schools, and I think this is an outcome of COVID. So MERV 13 not only has the benefit of distributing and cleansing air that has COVID, but it has the benefit of getting to those last bit of fine-tuned particles. And so they have scaled units in each one of their spaces, classroom spaces, office spaces, and communal spaces at their school, where they have MERV-13s deployed in each one of these units. And so we can go into a little bit more of that later, obviously, because there's still some significant matters to deal with.
Kevin, I'm sorry,
So-
just to clarify, they have HEPA filters, not MERV-13s in each classroom in each location.
Yes, right. But the current school will be deploying MERV-13 and then HEPA would be deployed. So you'd have MERV-13 filters on the air conditioning system, and then you would have HEPA filters in the HEPA systems, basically portable HEPA systems in each classroom.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the context. So we all know this is an institutional corridor. There are multiple schools proximate to the site. There are a lot of crossing guards. There's a lot of student and parent activity on the street, bicycles, pedestrians, buses, and cars. And that is part of this environment. And we feel that this is a part of that environment. One of the important siting criteria and the benefits of the site, because a lot, as the trip generation surveying and observations that we have looked at for existing Brooklyn Prospect schools, is a lot of people use public transit, both bus and rail. And here you have this corridor on both ends with both express bus and local bus service at the B37 and 35. You also have the B70 and the 63, and of course you have the NRD within 5 minutes of the site. So one of the things that we did, because we wanted folks here to have a view, I sent a guy out all day long to take pictures every 5 minutes without, trying to select the shots, trying to pick ones that look good every 5 minutes, time stamped. And so from starting at 7:35 in the morning to basically 5 minutes, you can see the traffic flow. And obviously we can discuss this a little bit more. I provided this in the review materials. So it's not like there's not traffic on the corridor. We wouldn't be here if there was, so the
Kevin,
idea is.
Could I just quickly ask that, what day was this taken?
It was taken last Wednesday.
Was, okay, last Wednesday, so the 6th, the 5th?
Yeah, it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. So it was literally last week though.
All right, January 4th or January 5th. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, and we have, a laundry list of other periods and time as well, but that is actually taken last week. And so, yes, you see buses, but the key thing is from 5 minutes to 5 minutes, you can see that the traffic is processing. And that's one of the unique aspects of the signalization on this corridor, is that it holds and releases traffic. And so we have periods literally for 4 to 5 minutes where you will literally not see any traffic entering the corridor or an occasional car coming through, and then you'll see vehicles coming through. But at the end of the day, what this means, and when we count these cars, and we look at what this means in terms of the data, these are the raw data. So we did 2 weeks, and these are the worst case conditions, the highest travel during a Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday over 2 weeks, during the AM, the departure period, and the after school period. And you basically have between 210 and 250 cars. And as I indicated on the last call, a typical roadway that has dedicated right or left turn lanes in New York City, particularly in a highly urbanized section, you can expect 400 to 450 cars. So this is something that we were surprised about in terms of the traffic volume. And if you go out there and you stand there and you watch traffic for 2 hours, you will understand that it's not, congested like sections of 3rd and 4th Avenue. This corridor, although it is a truck route, it has modest traffic. And so one of the things you asked also was to evaluate the average speed. And so the average speed is about 5 to 7 miles per hour with people stopping and that sort of thing. But I drove through the corridor about a half a dozen times to see how fast I could go through it, lacking a radar gun. And basically the maximum you can get is about 15 to 20 miles per hour. And that's basically with no vehicles, at stop locations. Okay, and so one of the major issues that the board was concerned about, just generally, I think outside of this project, What's going to happen with these last mile facilities coming on in Red Hook? What's going to be the impact of the closure of the eastbound lane on 20th Street? And so as a part of the discussion of this, I wanted folks to understand how DOT has set up the circulation network for the movement of goods. And there are things that are called through truck routes and local truck routes. So 29th, 39th, and 60th are local truck routes. Those are only for interborough goods distribution, local goods movement. Through trucks are for out-of-borough movement and out-of-state movement. And why that's important is, and I gave an example here, and I spoke to Jim Tampakis, who's been leading the charge against all of these last mile facilities coming on in Red Hook. And I've been working on with him many other projects. And he provided me some of this information related to one of the larger facilities that's coming online. And just so folks understand how last mile facilities work, trucks come in from regional distribution centers like Lehigh Valley, New Jersey Turnpike A to A, from Port Newark, from Howland Hook and Staten Island, and from JFK. And they use the regional roadway system because they're required to. Those are trucks with unsorted goods that go in to last mile facilities. The goods get sorted and then shipped out. And what are the type of vehicles that come out? Vans, the type of Amazon vans and the type of parcel delivery vans from UPS, the 2-axle trucks that come out of there. Those can go to any local road. They don't have to go to a truck route. And so you can see, and I provided a video of their animation and how they're going to operate that was presented to Department of City Planning. Their trucks distribute to the entire network. So at the end of this, the point of all of this is what's the impact on 20th Street? Because you still have local goods movement. As I showed, there were 3 routes, and I want to go back to that because what it shows here is at 20th Street, where you have at the end of that is the FedEx Ship Center. Though, you know, now that no eastbound movement is allowed, those vehicles are going to go to Prospect Expressway to deliver goods to Ocean Park, Midwood, and even Borough Park. I provided some drive time analysis in the backup. And the point being is that the trucks that are already delivering to Central Prospect Park and using 39th Street are going to use that for local goods distribution. And to back up this notion is the point that we've already evaluated traffic before and after this lane modification. So after we all heard about it, we went out and evaluated the traffic, and we did sample counts and looked at the additional truck traffic present on the corridor compared to when we took vehicular counts back in October of last year. And they were basically identical in terms of the volumes. In some cases, they were less. So happy to discuss that more and how the dynamics of that goods distribution works and in order to get to ultimately the traffic plan. So as we discussed before, students arrive starting at 7:45. Staff arrives prior to the site. There's no parking or driving that staff would be able to have on site. It's part of New York City DOT's program. They don't allow staff parking actually at sites, or they don't accommodate it. It's not required, but also the number of staff that use vehicles is very modest. But so the concept here is to do a staggered arrival. So in the morning, you have an hour and 15-minute arrival so K-2 students would arrive at 8 at 8:30 and 3 to 5 would arrive 8:30 to 9 with school buses arriving prior to that. And then you have the same sort of setup for student dismissal, you know, buses first, K-2 second, grades 3 to 5 last. And then there's an hour and a half after school period with about 20 to 25% of the student body that would, you know, depart as parents, you know, are able to pick up their children and their after school programs are completed. And so rather than going to this detail in this chart, the major takeaways here are, this is based on Windsor Terrace operations, right now it's at Willoughby and Windsor Terrace. And we looked at basically how parents arrive with their students now. And currently the drive rate ranges between 3% and 7% for K-5 during the AM period. At the dismissal period, it ranges approximately the same, about 4 to 8.8%. And then the after school period, because parents are coming, you know, from their work and that sort of thing, they're coming and picking up their children at a greater rate, but there's a greatly reduced student body at that point. And so what this amounts to is 16 cars arriving at the site between basically 8 and 9 a.m. And as you remember, so there's 12 and 4. So you actually have very little traffic coming from the sort of 3, 4, and 5th grade students. And, the younger students, more parents, want to drop their children off rather than taking them with public transit. And then at the 3 to 4 p.m. period, you have 15 cars. And so that's, basically, even if you were to platoon that in a short period of time, given the width of the drop-off area, it's really a very modest amount of traffic that needs to be managed. Not something that has to be disregarded, but want to put it in context. Okay, so how are we handling this? And this is one of the things I think in our last presentation kind of got glossed over and folks didn't understand. So I've provided some more illustrative materials to identify the issue. So at the top is the existing condition, which is basically a parallel double yellow line with a westbound lane and then an eastbound lane going in the opposite direction with a parking channel basically facing the south of 39th Street. And then what we're proposing is doing what's called a chicane, which was deployed when the building was being constructed for approximately 2 years. And I provided some photos of that going back to Google, where there previously were industrial uses. There was a hubcap company across the street, and it was a much more complicated corridor 10 and 15 years ago. So the idea here is to move the parking channel where parking is currently not allowed during the AM to the PM period of the school operation already, to basically turn that into a drop-off lane and basically have traffic maneuver around with it through that area, free flow. Both the entry and the exit to it are not changing. So the ability to make right turns, the ability for buses to alight, none of those things change. And as I note later in the presentation, we met with MTA at the site. They have no problems with the school location, the number of cars, or their ability to maneuver articulated buses through the corridor. And so here's maybe an easier visualization for folks to understand. So at the top, that photo is from when there was no double striping. It's since been restriped, but some of the lane markings had deteriorated. So as a part of this project, that would all be restored. And this is the proposed striping. And then you can see the sort of section. So basically, previously, you can see the bus on the left going through the through lane. You can see the parking lane. And then on the right, we're proposing that the parking lane is now the drive lane and becomes a drive channel. And then the westbound lane is now the through lane for traffic. And there you have the parking lane, which would be the drop-off zone in this area. And so overnight parking would still be allowed and restored in this area. So the parking conditions, are not changing appreciably in terms of the availability of spaces. And this is so here, even though we proposed bifurcating the bus drop-off, I wanted to show you, so remember, 12 cars, 16 cars over an hour period, and so if you had multiple buses, just sitting there, you would still be able to accommodate 5 cars on this channel. And the full area can accommodate, about 12 vehicles in total. And then you can see some pictures of the corridor. And so now when we layer on the safety plan, the concept is pretty simple. Deploy 2 safety stewards, trained safety stewards, to manage cars coming in and out of the drop-off zone with a greeter and a manager at the door to help assist children getting into the school and to basically manage the situation. We're going to add a crossing guard, even though we're showing no pedestrian trips, just to start off the project at 3rd Avenue and 33rd, or sort of 39th. And then at 4th Avenue, there's already a crossing guard deployed there. Obviously, we would evaluate whether or not that needs to be supplemented, but I've been out there, I think 12 times now, and observed them very effectively controlling that intersection and crossing students. And so from there, so I'm not going to summarize this. We went over all of this, but I wanted to get to this point because one of the major changes that's come since the last time we met is that we met with MTA DOT and the BSA at the site, and we reconned the site with them. And then we met in-house and we basically presented a similar presentation with a, little bit more technicality relating to the traffic generation and the traffic in general and how the corridor works. And, at that meeting, MTA concurred, we have no issues with the operations. Buses can locate fine as long as you're not moving stops. They even recommended if we needed to, we could move a stop. That's how accommodating they were in terms of discussing it, because they usually get moved around a lot. Now, from that, we've been discussing with the highest levels of DOT, what's going to make you feel comfortable with an operation here. And there are multiple student safety, school safety companies out there that specialize in supplementing staff and their experience and basically managing arrival and drop off and making sure students get in and out of their cars, because one of the major concerns is parents pull up, they're on their mobile devices, chatting, waiting to pick up students. These guys will make sure that cars move through the queue, get out of there. They don't sit there and wait. They will also make sure that parents don't pull up on the sidewalk across the street, wait and drop off, so they're there to manage and to steward traffic and not only the student traffic, but to make sure there are no conflicts with the existing operations on the corridor. So active management of the curb. And so right now we're working on DOT on basically an agreement for how this operation is going to work. And the safety company, I want to note, a plan doesn't set in stone forever. You learn from your experience. And these guys have significant experience in high volume traffic areas where they make real-time adjustments, staff surges that they can call and get additional people, then also reinforce that and adjust where people are at, how they're maneuvered, and what needs to be handled, and identify issues and constantly basically deploy practices that adjust to the circumstances to assist the school in getting their kids in a safe and accommodating fashion. And the other backup to all of this, and BSA was at this meeting as well when we discussed this idea of bringing a private operator to manage this in a long-term agreement, is to have clear standards, auditing processes, potentially snap checks that would have to be reported to DOT and the BSA, and also the deployment of potential alternatives. So we presented multiple offsite bus locations, so if it turns out for some reason that, operations don't work, there's two things that are going to happen. One, there's compliance hearings, and BSA discussed this. It gets written into the resolution that this agreement has to be a part of the operations, and the school only has a limit on its special permit that only goes for multiple years. So the fact is that BSA and the DOT and Brooklyn Prospect and their consultant team are fashioning an agreement that allows reporting protocols, that allows for performance measures, and allows DOT to be assured that this can be managed in an effective process, working with the great experience that Brooklyn Prospect has at 6 schools, over the past decade and a half at all types of different locations. So, some of the notes here are about the number of personnel, which are adjusted based on need. And the key part of this is they're going to keep the queue moving. They're going to make sure cars enter and exit in a safe fashion so they do not interfere with the traffic. They can take advantage of the signal phasing, as I discussed, that allows this corridor to clear and for cars to leave. And then also they will make sure that parents do not idle longer than the queue allows, and that drop-offs are not done in an untoward way. And to assure that neighboring businesses do not park their cars on the sidewalk and are not compliant, because there is an occasional car here or there. They set all day, but the sidewalk is not a parking lot. So that's one of the other, components of this. So,
all right, Kevin, can I ask you to wrap up, or
that's it? We're all done.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. So I appreciate, as you know, the struggle we've had is, the devil is always in the details. And I want to thank you, Kevin and Richard and Trisha, putting together a very comprehensive and sort of, item by item response to our questions. I do appreciate it very much. Not very many land use applications have that sort of back and forth. But, I think it was important to talk through these items. And just to reiterate, for everybody, this is a special permit. We had asked for information on the demographics. There are some concerns about indoor or air quality related to the location. We also had concerns about traffic, which are addressed by Kevin's presentation in terms of the photo documentation sometime last week. And, the idea that there's modest traffic on the corridor. We discussed, the impact of last mile warehouses on our district overall. As you know, we have a special subcommittee run by Katie Walsh looking at that right now. So that feeds into the mix. And then understanding you guys have put together a traffic and safety plan. Quick question, has a private safety company manage traffic in any other school in Brooklyn that we might be able to see or understand the experience of that?
So the company that we're talking up to right now is allied with Stan Schwartz Engineering, which some people may know him. It's a company of his, and we can get a list of that. That's actually, I'm remiss for not doing that, but for finding out where those locations are. But immediately after this call, Stephen and members of the team, we can get you other locations. And yes, if we can get them in Brooklyn, we will absolutely note that and get that over to the board.
Okay. So I want to just a note to Jim and Victoria, if I can ask your indulgence. I think we're going to switch over around 7:10. I apologize, but I do need to get this vote in on this land use action. So if you guys just hang out for a few more minutes after. So I'm going to go to land use committee members in terms of responses and questions to the presentation. I guess, Jeremy, if please raise your hand, and then this is for land use committee first. Any members who have a question or response to Kevin and Richard and Tricia, let's do that now.
So folks, please use the raise hand function, and sorry about the choking dog. Katie Walsh is first.
Hi, sorry for not putting my video on at the moment, but I appreciate the follow up and follow through that you all did on a lot of the questions that we asked in the last meeting. And one of the things I wanted to find out in your presentation, you've talked a little bit about 39th Street and accessibility for folks to drop off kids, in cars. How many do you have a sense, based on your current numbers, how many people will actually be using cars to drop off kids? How many folks are actually, going to be getting there by foot because they're taking the train or they're walking? And then there'll be the ones crossing under the underpass. Do you have a sense of numbers? Like how many people do you actually expect to use, drop individual drop-offs?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was on slide number 35. So in the AM period, 16 cars are estimated, and that's based off of 2 school cohorts that we surveyed all of the parents and observed their operations. That 16 cars, basically 20 students, would be dropping off in the AM period, so 8 AM to 9, and that there would be 52 students who would be walking, 138 would be taking rail or the subway, and 103 students would be on school buses. So there'd be 3 school buses. And so in terms of the trip assignment, or whether children will be walking across 3rd Avenue, we actually have very few children, if any, that would be crossing. I think our this is part of the analysis that DOT will look at, but it's literally like a handful, and like 1 or 2. So almost all of the trips, 98% are generated from the 4th Avenue corridor. And then during the dismissal period, we have 15 cars and 92 students taking 3 buses, 87 students that would be taking the subway, 47 students that would be taking the bus, and all of those would be with caregivers. And then in the dismissal period, we would have 21 cars over an hour-and-a-half period, and 35 students taking transit with caregivers, and 11 students that would be walking home. Katie, if you need any more texture to that, yeah, we can provide that.
Okay, that helps with on balance. And John, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you too many follow-ups. Just the follow-up on this. You met with DOT. You had discussions with them about some of these adjustments and recommendations. Did they say that they would do anything on 3rd Avenue itself? Did you get any kind of commitment? Lighting, safety, infrastructure, bollards, at anything? Did you get any kind of commitment from them outside of that, the site-specific thing that you talked about?
Yeah, I mean, not related to that, but the applicant is willing, to do what's related to the school in terms of like general improvements, Katie, that are needed right throughout the entire corridor. I'm not aware of those plans, but as indicated, like generally things like daylighting or bollards or that sort of thing would be related to project generated traffic. But we're still in those discussions for them to determine whether or not additional improvements are from that, are needed, related to the school for that corridor. But as I indicated, we don't have any residential, sort of structure in that proximate area, based on our geographic GIS analysis in terms of, where students are coming from, where we would assume the grade cohorts are coming from. We literally only saw 1 or 2 trips, and most of those were using the eastbound sidewalk, walking from the north or the south from the residential neighborhoods that are part of the Sunset Park neighborhood. So no, we didn't have any commitment from them about improvements. But what we are doing is we're putting in ADA. The school is committing to put in ADA tactile ped ramps in these corners to basically improve the current ADA ramps that are there up to the standards that they're now deploying. So that's the school has indicated that to DOT, and our applications indicated to DOT that we will be doing that. Now, Katie, I would say this: if you want to, if you and members of the land use committee want to discuss improvements to that corridor, and recommendations that you have, that are things that should be deployed, I would be happy to hear them. I think we would be happy to hear them. We want to make a safe corridor. We want to be a good neighborhood. We want to, be able to connect areas for pedestrians safely. So, we're open to hearing, recommendations there. But generally what DOT does is they demand improvements, or they request improvements that are related to the travel characteristics of the proposed land use. And here we're not generating, ped traffic, at the 3rd Avenue and the 34th Street intersection, except, on the sidewalk segments on the east side of 3rd Avenue.
Thanks, John. You can go to other questions. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Katie.
you, Katie. Cesar Zuniga is next.
Hi, good evening. So I have a comment and a couple of just brief questions. So first, I really want to acknowledge and really acknowledge how much we appreciate that you all are engaging with us in this conversation and doing the due diligence and following up. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I appreciate that. So thank you for that. So I guess a quick question about, and I've been popping in and out, I've been multitasking. So if you covered this, I'm sorry, but in your sort of due diligence since the last time that we met, one of the things that's happened is that the DOT has converted 20th Street into a one-way and has decided in their infinite wisdom that truck route would move to 39th Street. And it's something that we're obviously very concerned about, and we're in sort of the process of organizing some kind of a response. For obvious reasons. I think 39th Street has been an utter disaster, and so this solution doesn't help. Did you take that into consideration in this latest round of due diligence? First question, and second question is, when you talk about the chicane, what exactly is that? Is it just going to be striped? Is that how people are going to know to maneuver it, or is there going to be something more
So there break. So let me deal with that second question first, and then I'll go back to the 39th 20th Street thing. Because we did do a section on it, and you probably missed it, and that's something that I think we can have a pretty good discussion on, and actually maybe relieve some of the concerns. Not that they're will be fully alleviated. So in terms of the chicane, it would be like a typical roadway where if you have 2 lanes, you have striping. Having said that, there's another way that we're looking at this and would deploy is using either what are called flexible delineators or temporary bollards. They could actually lay down as the school arrives and departs. And there's also another thing called toppers and connectors that you see deployed, like when Con Ed comes out and is working on a conduit, is you have a series of cones and they're connected by a chain. And it allows you, in the case, say somebody's car breaks down or somebody just refuses to get off text messaging, you'd be able to break the chain and allow the car to get out of the queue. So one of the things that we are seriously considering here is deploying a mechanism like that has bollards that can be removed very quickly, so that overnight parking can be enabled, that allows an extra level of safety. And obviously the counter to that, and based on we did a mathematical queuing analysis, on this to determine whether or not, so that, folks that are familiar, like with, going to a Starbucks drive-thru or something, you have a single line queue, right? And so all the cars back up and they have their own waiting time. And so here, if we put in the flexible delineators, we would have to make sure, and this is one of the things where the private safety operator comes in, where they have to process vehicles, because the safest way for the corridor to operate is one exits, one enters, and it exits at a time, right? You pull up in the queue and one departs. That's a very controlled, measured way of controlling the traffic. And I think the idea is to deploy it and to test it, and to see how it operates. But definitely with 12 or even 16 or 21 cars, we're not talking about 60 or 80, where people need to process one at a time and occupy all the spaces. A single line queue with those flexible delineators should operate really, really well. But that is sort of the double approach there. Now, in terms of the last mile facilities, may I share my screen again so I can just show Caesar some of the analysis briefly, or I can just walk you through it, Caesar. I provided a section in this and some backup materials previously. Okay, so, yeah. So, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay, so this. Sorry, I'm trying to enlarge it. Just Caesar, let me know if you can't see the screen clearly. It's just easier because I have multiple monitors.
It's fine.
Here.
You don't have to put it into.
Actually, just Kelly, can you just describe it? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
But,
so here are the highlights. So Caesar, in the light yellow are local truck routes. The dark orange is our through truck routes. And so the way local truck routes work, so 60th, 39th, and 20th Street are the most proximate local truck routes. Those only allow local goods movement, so interborough deliveries, and everything else that's coming. So last mile facilities that bring in the large unsorted deliveries, those go into the last mile locations, and what comes out are vans, like the Amazon vans, the parcel delivery vehicles from UPS. Those do not have to be assigned to a local truck route. They're commercial listed vehicles, commercial plated vehicles. They're below the size that's required to stay on a local truck route. And so what's coming out of those vehicles, not that there's not going to be traffic distributed from those, and not that I don't feel for Red Hook because of the large trucks coming in, but what's going to come out in this area are the smaller vehicles that can go throughout the local network. In terms of closing 20th Street, and the impact of the eastbound lane. So you still got the westbound, right, going in. So Prospect Expressway is the most easily accessible network to get you to Borough Park, to get you to Flatbush, and even to sections, when you look at the drive times, even to get to sections of Sunset Park. I do not believe, and I firmly believe this by, I ran this through our GIS analysis, not just through Google, to look at the drive times. And I don't really see a rational reason why, those goods distributors that previously used 20th Street to access the western portions of Brooklyn would go down to 39th Street. And so I feel, and also the last thing is, we did data collection before the lane change and after the lane change, and the number of truck movements on this corridor are nearly identical. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It really does. And so I think just on the chicane question, for me personally, I think the more we can do around the drop-off area to put in, safety accommodations, I think that's desirable.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Cesar. I'd like to, Nick, I want to make sure that we get any questions answered because I am running up against a hard time limit here. So go ahead, Nick.
I'll be brief. Kevin, my question really relies around in the chicane area. I'm still concerned with, kind of that pickup and drop off area and the traffic. And I feel like, potentially, the linked partitions, I forget exactly how you describe them.
Same concept, yeah.
I would imagine those to be very important because just you want to discourage folks from essentially opening up the doors on the other side, which is very close to the ongoing traffic. So I think that will be very important. Obviously, should this be proceeded with. And then any other mitigation measures that you guys can do, the specialty consultant and what they can do, just because the board, rightfully so, is very concerned with pedestrian deaths in the area, especially when it comes to children.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Nick, I mean, I'm really glad Caesar brought that up because it's one of the things that we're discussing with DOT, and it's an easy, safe fix, and it absolutely prevents people from opening their car doors into oncoming traffic. So I definitely appreciate the note, and we're that's part of our discussions right now with DOT, and that's one of the emerging improvements that we met out there at the site that we're proposing.
All right, thanks, Nick. All right, Land Use Committee, any last comments? I will remind you, this is a continuation of the public hearing previously. We've taken testimony on this. You have all heard now a couple times the presentation. You've all on the committee have also received this presentation. So please, if there are any questions that you have not been able to ascertain answers to in all those previous iterations, last chance to ask. Going. All right. What I'm going to do right now then is I'm going to turn it over to the Land Use Committee to take a vote on this. And just so everyone understands, this is the committee voting on this application, whether or not to approve the special 7319 special permit to allow a proposed use group 3 charter school in an M12 zoning district. This is BSA application 202156BZ at the address of 341 39th Street for Brooklyn Prospect Charter School. Okay, so the vote will be yes to approve this application or recommend to the full board that this application be approved on the community board level. A no obviously means that we do not agree. All right. So Jeremy, I think if I could ask you to call the land use committee.
Do you have a second on the motion?
Well, is it a motion?
Second.
I don't think it's a motion, is it?
You just made a motion, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, can I get a second?
Second the motion.
All right, Nick is seconding the motion.
All
All
right,
right.
so I'm going to mute everybody. I will call roll for the committee. And when I call your name, please unmute, express your vote, and then mute yourself again. So everybody is muted, and we will start with John Fontillis.
And again, just to remind everybody, yes means that you support the application and support the recommendation to the full board for it to be approved. I vote yes.
Thank you. Nicholas Azadian.
Yes.
Thank you. Sandra Alfonso. I'm sorry, Sandra?
Yes.
Thank you. Joan Body.
Yes.
Thank you. Cynthia Gonzalez.
Yes.
Thank you. Kenny Guan. Zachary Jacy.
Yes.
Thank you. Christina Lem. Jimmy Lee.
Yes.
Thank you. Arelis Martinez. Antoinette Martinez. Paul Mack. Marilyn Melman. Daniel Murphy. Karen Rolnick.
Yes.
Thank you. Katie Walsh.
No.
Thank you. Cesar Zuniga.
I'm ex officio, so I'm just voting present.
Thank you. 1, 2. So the vote is 8 in favor, 1 opposed, no abstentions with 1 voting present.
All right, so the land use committee will be recommending to the full board to approve the application. I want to thank Richard and Kevin and Tricia for attending and providing the additional information. Please tune in next week when we go for the full board for the application.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
to
John.
everyone.
Thank you to you and the members of the committee. Just one quick question, John. Would you expect that we would make any sort of presentation at the full board, or will this be something that the committee will bring in their resolution?
The committee will bring in the resolution, but it will be a combined minutes from the previous public hearing as well as tonight.
Okay.
And if
But I mean, I think we could take a few questions, but I do not want to have a presentation that night.
Okay, so we'll be in attendance, for your benefit, but we'll be there listening unless otherwise. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
John, I would love to just quick moment of thanks. Thank you so much to this board, this committee, all the people who put so much work into this. This means so much for our school, and we're really grateful for your time.
Thanks, Dana. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to the next item. Jim, Victoria, thank you so much for waiting. I appreciate it. As you know, it's the sausage being made in land use. So if I could, we have, is Victoria here on the line? I don't see her.
Yes, apologies. Me forwarding my link apparently cloned several Jim Glazers. The one with the video is me. And Victoria is trying to log in, but apparently she's corralling a bunch of young people who have the spring flu or the winter flu down in Florida. So she begged me to try to handle this on my own, or there would be a lot of background noise. But your advice in speaking with you the other day was very, very helpful, and I think we're in good hands.
All right, great. So without further ado, I'd like Jim Glazer, who I don't know if you have an organization that you call yourself, or is it do you have a name?
Well, I lead a large art. I'm a number of things. We're just calling this the Save Grand Prospect Hall project. But I do lead a large arts collective in New York. I am a longtime activist, more on national things than local things, and I'm getting a great education on local politics now. And for the purposes of part of what we're going to propose, I'm also an executive search consultant, a high-level business recruiter who does understand the language of business and bringing together solid business ideas and actually trying to link them into community good from time to time. So a number of things there. My team is a growing one. Victoria Alexander, who may be one of the Jim Glazers here, is a former member of Community Board 6, a real estate professional in Red Hook who very much understands those sets of issues. And Jessica Brewer, who also has the New Year's flu, is our attorney who was with us yesterday to discuss the legal side of what we're proposing. So a lot here. And when we heard about this, like probably everybody else, in the end of August, we were just shocked that something that seemed so critically part of the neighborhood and part of the historical fabric of Brooklyn was sold, and then we saw it come out. I think it was the Real Deal or Brooklyn Paper that it was gonna be destroyed. And so here we were during COVID, during election season, and this storied building 2 blocks from my apartment that I literally looked down into the compound from our roof, all of a sudden was going away. And we started to mobilize the neighborhood on the Nextdoor social app and other community networks that I am a part of. And very quickly, we discovered some teenagers who had started a petition drive that grew to about 40,000 signatures in the next 3 weeks. We brought together a legal team that included Jessica Brewer, our pro bono attorney who's doing most of the work, but also notably Norman Siegel, a good friend and advisor, famous civil rights attorney, who said he would help us, but only if I stuck with it until the end and we left it all on the field, because you just never know when you might win, and some others. And then we got to work gathering the electeds for support. Carlos Menchaca has always been a supporter. He's also a big supporter of what the hell that's been going on at our building here at 255 18th Street. So I got to know him through that. And Bobby, we've had long chats with Bobby Carroll and Jumani Williams' office, very interested in helping as well, although, also election cycle. And then we started to line up the incoming electeds, Alexa Vilez, Shahana Hanif, and Marcela Mitens as well. And so we're building a coalition, and exactly what we are doing is we have some theories, we have some ideas, and per John, we're whittling those down now, and very much here seeking your advice, your direction, connections to anybody else that should be part of this, who should be part of this coalition. And very specifically, right now we're looking at sort of a 2-pronged strategy. One is the legal strategy, and that is, and actually just another part of the coalition has been all the press connections that have been very interested in this. Gothamist has written a number of articles. The Daily News published an op-ed that I wrote, and Michael Ames just recently published in the New Yorker a story which really came off as an obituary. And while we loved the story because it really filled in some of the historical notes we thought were getting missed by the focus on the Halkiases and Make Your Dreams Come True, we really wanted to be out there, how important this structure has been since the late 1890s. And but unfortunately, the editor said Grand Prospect Hall didn't need to die, and it's not dead yet. The building is still standing, and we believe there may still be some positive outcomes. So very specifically, the legal strategy that we had been enacting, we did get a temporary restraint, a temporary injunction against destruction that was only for 2 weeks, but the judge was also on our side. So he delayed his response for 3 weeks after that. But that has since passed. And there is a full demolition permit in place, and we're just not sure why the new owners, the Rigases, have done so. But whenever they do come out with their plans for the location, we are prepared to fight them based on SECRA statute, which John certainly had some ideas, but taking something away like this from a neighborhood, we are going to do what we can to at least make a lot of noise about this. And then alternatively, and this is where my business background comes in, I've always thought from the beginning that we had to put together some kind of business deal or coalition that would get the new owner on, at least interested in talking. And to date, the new owner has not responded. We have been trying to communicate through their law firm, who was opposing counsel, and through Pitta Bishop, their advocacy firm. But I think by the fact that they haven't destroyed the building yet, they are probably considering alternatives, because they do lose some tax benefits and some other things if they bring down this building, which is not landmarked, as you probably know, but is in the Registry of Historical Places. So this business concept that John certainly helped us flesh out was a way to get the owner to consider an alternative to what we understand is a dense apartment complex that does not need any variances, that would do as little possible for affordable housing, and would probably enter most of the the parking garage and garbage trucks and so forth in from the 16th Street side. So we know what they want to do through feedback we've gotten from Bobby Carroll, but we also know that they're chinsing out on the affordable housing piece. So they've gotten pushback, and when they do come out with this plan, we're going to try to fight it. But in lieu of that, I want to discuss with you all a two-pronged strategy, which is a little bit of a Hail Mary. One would be variances to build higher in trade for having a cultural event space in probably the basement and first floor, something we could call Prospect Hall, something that would probably mirror some of the decor, so that we could somehow maintain a cultural space that could continue to do some of what the Grand Prospect Hall was. And then something I thought was just crazy talk, which Carlos Menchaca encouraged me to pursue, and John said might be doable, and he's referred us to other people, is the concept of capping the Prospect Expressway directly across the street from the Grand Prospect Hall site, with some mix potentially of green space and affordable housing, which would, of course, change the fabric of the neighborhood, raise the property value of the Grand Prospect Hall site, and probably excite everybody in our neighborhood, the electeds list, and some of the NIMBY neighbors who wouldn't want a building going higher than current zoning would allow. So definitely a bit of a Hail Mary, but in this particular case, part of the business deal would be horse trading variances and for some money from the developer to go to the capping of across the street. And for people who don't know, Prospect Expressway is already like 2 or 3 stories down. So from a engineering perspective, it does seem like it wouldn't be as complicated as capping some other highways. So that's the summary. I know we're pressed for time, so I'm here to sort of listen now and take down any notes and answer your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. So just a note, I did have a conversation with Jim and Victoria. Victoria, that is you under with Jim's name as well. Jim, there's is that Victoria down there? I'm not sure.
Sorry, yeah, no, I don't think so. So
okay.
That's definitely not Victoria.
Okay. All right. So I did have a conversation with Jim and Victoria last week, and I did mention that, as we all know, the district is in desperate need for affordable housing. And given the sort of confluence of many different now elected officials who have previously been friends of the board or represented the board or have been on the board for a couple people, as well as being, understanding the issues that at least Community Board 7 and Community Board 6 in our area of South Slope, Windsor Terrace, Sunset Park, and Greenwood Heights. It seems that there may be a ability to knit together support for maybe a big picture idea, as Jim has mentioned, and perhaps that might be an incentive, maybe to have this new owner of the Grand Prospect Hall site to contribute. So anyway, I just wanted to make that clear. It was actually riffing off an idea Jim had. I'm not going to take credit for your idea, Jim. I will say that I would fully support it. But as I said to Jim, it's only money, right? It's always down to that. It's only money. So I think it is something that we should talk about, especially the fact of the matter is that, from my point of view, Grand Prospect Hall was a cultural icon and a landmark in the neighborhood, and to see its demise is troubling. But we're always in need for venues where the community can come together, and if out of this we can get something like that, then I think that would be a goal worth pursuing. So I'm going to, we have a couple of questions from panelists. Let me start with Katie, and then we'll go to Nick, and then Cesar. Katie Walsh.
Yes, thanks. And apologies again for not having my video on. I also just wanted to say Jim had come to a board meeting. I believe it was our November meeting or October. Jim might now, I can't remember, but and then we spoke in the fall as well. Some of the things that and had this conversation about Jim coming to a land use meeting and thinking that might be a really good place to start this discussion. Some of the things that have transpired since then, I'll just kind of put this out there, is that you do have the infrastructure, you have infrastructure funds, but more specifically, you also have this big project that's happening in the South Bronx around capping the expressway. And so I'm hearing you talk about a couple of the electeds, and we should also be talking about our congressional representatives. And so I think Jim, that is another leadership angle to this, but one consideration, concern, or something that I'm thinking about is where, for a cultural center and for space it's created, that there is a discrete C3 status, nonprofit status for an organization, and really thinking about that the wealth generation, but the revenue generation and where that then lives. And so I know I'm getting ahead, but really endemic in the principles of what this thing is, if there's any legs to it, that it's a C3 where it's a community asset, and that should be kind of part of the build out. Thanks.
Definitely important, Katie. That's a great comment to do. All right, Nick?
I have a couple of questions. So, Jim, what would you say to me if you recently bought your home and then I sued you because of whatever you're doing to your own home?
This is a thought idea, right? A thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and John, you'll see where I'm going with this in a second, which is, more or less, if we thought it was so culturally important, did we not get a number of streets, added to landmark status in Brooklyn very recently? And so if we thought it was so important, then we should have done that. And
You have
unfortunately,
to, no, Nick, but you can't be, to get the land use, they had to show how there was continuous fabric. And because that part of the district has been destroyed, you only had the individual piece of land. So I just want to say that's why
I
with land
understand,
use
but
and
what I'm
landmarks.
getting at is that the point is that we had the opportunity to do it. We didn't do it.
No, we didn't
And
have the
now it's-
opportunity. No, we didn't have the opportunity to do it. Land use has to be contiguous fabric to be able to qualify. And that's why many parts of the district could not even be considered because they can't. And that where that stands, there's been too much development around it. So it can't be part of the consideration.
Although, Katie, I think no, I don't want to speak for Nick, but I think the idea is that if we thought the building was of a quality, whether or not it was architectural or cultural, we could have tried to find a way when the Halkiases were alive to try and recommend it for landmarking, not as a district, but as a individual landmark building itself.
Right. So I mean that's where I'm going with this. So Jim, I agree with you that it's a cultural institution. However, I think that you're going to have some real issues, specifically legally, because somewhere along the lines it's going to be viewed as taking. And I think the business approach is probably the better way to go. However, if someone's already has a development plan and they're already pushing forward, a lot of that money is probably already borrowed or already promised to somebody else in terms of development. So you're going to be delaying them one way or another. And so whatever you end up doing, you're going to have to do it quickly, and you're going to have to make it attractive enough to make it, feasible for them to even consider it. Otherwise, it probably behooves them just to probably try to put down your lawsuit as soon as possible, if you have one already, and then proceed with whatever they've got planned.
Yeah, no, Nick, I agree with you. And honestly, I've been thinking this was going to be a business deal from the beginning, or we're going to lose, right? My dad taught me chess at age 4, and I've asked everybody who has a bigger brain than I that knows this field, and it just seemed logical. So we've had talks with Jemani Williams' office, a national developing firm that would be interested in potentially buying the space outright from the Rigases. But we're in this weird situation where, despite the fact that we really could help the Rigases, they're just not responding to us yet. Because, and I can tell you off list sociologically what I've heard about the owner and the father. So they're waiting, but they still haven't torn the place down. So getting more support to give us the leverage for the business case here is really the primary thing here. And the legal strategy is just, have a little stick while you're trying to line up the carrots. Pretty much.
The last thing I'll say is that little stick may actually sour the goodwill that you may have. So I would tell you to tread carefully. I, hope you can come to some sort of arrangement to save it. However, I do want to mention that, the board's involvement should be very, very carefully weighted in a situation like this, especially considering this is a 100% private transaction where, we do not have a direct say in this particular matter.
Okay, well, the other reason I'm personally, as somebody who's stood in streets with signs more times than I can count, one of the other reasons I'm on this as a native New Yorker who just dearly loves this city is how many of us just didn't even know that this thing wasn't protected, and how many other properties are out there like this. And if you read the New Yorker piece, New Yorker Online, that's a big part of this. Simeon Bankoff saying, let's use this as an educational opportunity and start making lists of all the other places, because I mean, this thing happened so quickly with Michael Halkias dying of COVID, and then the wife not knowing what she was doing. All of a sudden, this Staten Island based guy bought this thing, pushing it through DOB when nobody was looking. And then Lander and Bobby Carroll actually sent in the LPC request after the demolition permit had already been issued. So we were just blindsided by this, and real estate people follow this stuff. The 40,000 signatures on our petition, and the hundreds of thousands, millions maybe, of people that have been in that building just didn't know this was happening. And you are correct. Everybody who just cringed at what's been going on there just wishes we had taken, including Brad Lander, just wishes that we had done something about this sooner.
All right, thanks, Nick. Cesar?
So thank you, Nick. And I think you just kind of did a little of the level setting that I wanted to do for the benefit of the board, right? And as chair of the board, that's kind of like really my sort of hyper focus is like, what's going to be our role, if any? So just to, again, level set, this is private property. There is no real mechanism, right? Because they're not asking for any rezoning. Am I right about that? Or am I assuming that there is no land use action that we need to entertain, John, correct?
Not at present.
Okay.
But just as a point of information, the site is zoned R6B, which is really only 2 FAR, although it is a pretty big site. So you could mass stuff, you can get a lot of square footage, but you're really capped at a 5-story height because it's R6B.
Yeah.
So the buildings may be spread out, but and there could be a lot of units, but they're not going to be very high.
Yeah. So that I think Jim and Nick, your inclination toward a business deal is probably the most appropriate for now anyway, unless something changes where we then have an actual role in any kind of variance or land use action or whatever. And that being said, I think for us as a board too, in terms of, I want to put something out there around like this mega sort of idea around the transformation that you described. It sounds amazing. It sounds great. And but I think for us as a board, we also have, and to John's point, absolutely, like, anytime we talk about any kind of space for the community, you guys are talking about a cultural center, a community center, that's something that really, I think for us is compelling. I would say that as a board, this is something for us, this project, if it moves forward, is something for us to, keep an eye out for. But I think also we have our own kind of priorities with some other spaces, right? I'll be, like the courthouse in which we currently reside. I think that for me, that's been a priority since I took over as chair, right? To convert that, to utilize all of our political capital and social capital to really focus in on that particular property. So I just want to put that out there as a board. There are other priorities for us to consider in utilizing some of this capital. That all being said, that particular building is for all of us special and important, and it's also part of our district. So I just want to put that out there for our board members that we have other considerations, and we just have to figure out how to balance and or navigate multiple things if that's what it comes to.
Thanks, Cesar. We'll go to Cindy, then back to Katie. Cindy?
Yeah, I want to thank Jim and all the people in the community that are organizing around this. And personally speaking, I wholeheartedly support this effort. I do want to say that it oftentimes happens where it's only after a building has changed hands that community residents realize this is how Grand Central and the Boathouse were saved. So it's a lot of times once you realize that a community asset might be going away, or I understand that this is a private asset, but that it really has become a cultural icon in our community. So I just wanted to share that perspective, and also just ask other board members. I'm not currently a land use committee member, but at what point would there be a possibility that the community board could issue a letter of support for a consideration of plans that save the building that's there, or is it not in our purview? Is that kind of what you were trying to say, Cesar?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure that I was trying to say that. But I think we should explore it, though. I think your suggestion we should explore. I think, again, just to be a little bit more clear with my point, I want us to continue to, again, the court building to sort of be part of our sort of strategic planning for supporting community spaces, right? So I think in either case, whether it's Grand Prospect Hall or whether it's a courthouse, I think we need to do some due diligence around, what's appropriate for us to do. A letter of support, my initial gut is, I don't see anything wrong with that, but I think there needs to be a much broader conversation and more due diligence.
Okay, thank you. I just like to put it out there, if those, especially that have been involved in these conversations, it seems like as this progresses, that if there are alternative plans that come to the fore, that having the community board support would be sort of meaningful in helping save this kind of building that's a historical icon of the community.
Thanks, Cindy. Katie?
Yeah, I'm just going to build on that. And I would say that we can be on the record that this is a historical building that is important, that has served many different uses in communities. I don't know if anyone from our community board has ever been to the Balkan Festival, but I know that Grand Prospect Hall hosted the Balkan Music Festival for years and years and years. And so there are a lot of folks who were also moved to support this because of their participation in that. And, bringing, again, people across generations, across countries, to that. So it does have this really rich history that is also contemporary. And so as a matter of course, next steps, I would love to see a letter that just calls out the building, the significance, puts Community Board 7 on the record of stating that we don't have to talk about the future use cases and what it could be or what it could not be, but I think we should at least be on the record. I also think this conversation has raised things about there was this beautiful community effort to do landmarking in our district many years ago that did preserve the fabric where it needs to be a continuous corridor. Is there, desire to have a muscle around landmarking in our neighborhood, in our Community Board 7, that we can really take that up? Is there a community-based effort to do that? Is there a community board energy there, that's untapped so that we can move forward? I think that this conversation has also kind of said that, provoked that. But as a kind of specific next step, I would love to see a letter of support, and happy as a land use committee member to work on others with that.
You know what, Katie, I think that's a good jumping off point for us in terms of being involved and I think I like the emphasis on what the property means to the community as opposed to weighing in on any, because, and again, I know this, Jim, I totally appreciate this, catching everyone by surprise. So I'm not sure that you guys are at a place where you have an articulated plan to say, okay, this is what we're going to use in this sort of business transaction. So I don't think weighing in on any sort of idea moving forward is appropriate, but certainly Catherine, I think, just being on record as to the significance of the property, I think that's, that seems appropriate to me. But again, let's have a conversation, Jeremy, and maybe, just.
Well, one specific thing that would be more helpful than, generic support, and believe me, generic support will still be something I can work with, would be something we could bring to the owner's representative stating that if they would consider carving out some space for a nonprofit cultural space in part of the first floor and the basement, then this board might consider variances that would replace the space that we would want going down with potentially going up. And note, this is a 12 property assemblage that they bought. So it's a huge amount of space. So going up just one more floor would create more than enough space for something that we could call Prospect Hall. It may not be grand, but it was originally called Prospect Hall until the Halkiases, the people who bought it in 81, changed it to Grand Prospect Hall. So something that was sort of French Renaissance or Victorian-ish that said Prospect Hall, that was nonprofit, that we baked in a lot of the mission statement and we could come together and we could talk about that. That would continue the legacy with just some generic support for helping with a business deal, or however we need to couch it, would be the specific idea that I would put in front of you.
Jim is the person who has been vocal about saying that we could put a letter together that talks about the importance. I don't think you're going to get, at least out of this meeting, like in terms of appropriateness, in terms of how we function, right? We're not going to kind of weigh in on future development cases. I think right now where we're arriving, at least this is what I think I'm hearing, is I'm hearing that there could be a letter of support. Sorry, I apologize, I jumped in, but I just wanted to kind of give that level of detail of the kind of letter of support that I think I'm hearing us put together. It's not going to then kind of reference future development use cases. It's about the importance of the site.
Okay, I think absolutely you're right. That's where we're headed towards. I think what I'll do is, I think we should also talk about this with the full board next week. But I think we could, maybe put some general points for the full board to consider and have a little bit of discussion about it as part of my land use report. And then if the full board seems in agreement, then we could put together a letter exactly as you're stating, that the significance of the site, the cultural connection, the opportunity for something that could relate to the community, I think is all, good stuff that we could put in a letter of support. Does that sound okay?
I love it.
Okay. Karen.
Yeah, the Grand Prospect Hall means a lot to all of us, and thank you for coming here and pitching your ideas to us. We're always happy when people come and it sounds like you're trying to accomplish something really wonderful. But this may sound really pathetic, but in lieu of how much the property did mean for us, maybe we could do like some sort of street renaming or something along that for the previous owners or something like that, and maybe at least put up a plaque if nothing else can work. Just an idea.
I mean, that's pretty cool. Grand Prospect Boulevard would also potentially be an exciting thing to talk to the owners about if they allow us to continue having a Prospect Hall there, something that would probably raise their property value. So I love, give me a bunch of different variables. I'm a creative person. I will stitch them together. So I love the idea of continuing this conversation. I will continue to put electeds together and so forth. But my last question, just because the new owners were very slick about how they push this through. I just want to understand, when they actually come out with a plan, do you all see that plan, or will they be able to sneak that through somehow? Because I feel like when their plan doesn't satisfy the community, we would like to have some feedback. So how does that process work when they do come out with a plan?
If they comply with the zoning on the site, R6B, and the number of dwelling units that's allowed per the area that they've defined, as you said, I mean, it's 12 lots they've put together. So it's a pretty substantial site. They can, and if they build to the requirements, they can build what's called as of right without any review other than the Department of Buildings. And, you know, Department of Buildings, all they'll do is make sure that the area that they've said they're going to build, it complies with the zoning requirements. And if it does, essentially they get a building permit and they can go to town. Only if there is if they're looking to increase the zoning, or if they are doing a large scale site plan for some reason, they want to build much higher than 5 stories or 50 feet. Or if they would like to avail themselves of some of the incentives relative to affordable housing or community facility, which would not be as of right, then that's when it would come to the board. That's the one role we have. If an owner wants to change something that is not per the rules, then we get a chance to review. As you know, as Victoria knows, community boards are still advisory, so we make a recommendation that doesn't have the force of law. But you know, the new council member, Shahana Hanif, might have a bully pulpit that you know, might be able to use that to you know, to engage with the developer. Because certainly, if the developer is working on the site, they may be interested in other locations in the district or in, you know, the 2 neighborhoods, CB6 or CB7. And it, you know, always behooves a developer to be on the right side of a council member and not piss them off, right? So, but again, I mean, we don't really have a land use adjudicatory role on this.
Okay.
But, you know, certainly we can support, as Katie mentioned, we can support a letter that you know, recognizes the site's importance to us as a community, and that might help.
Okay, is there any requirements for affordable housing if they just avoid any need to deal with the board?
Well, essentially, if you want to provide affordable housing, that's a debit to your development proposal. So you want to get paid for it, right? So you want to get money from some other public agency. I'm not even sure if that is even possible here, but you know, it might be something that they may be considering in order to increase the density, the number of units on the site.
Yeah, they characterize this as a low-rise apartment complex with a quote affordable component, which might have been speak for, you know, as little as they can get away with. So part of
there is no requirement to provide affordable housing as of right on this site.
Okay.
I see a question from David Estrada.
Oh yeah, just on that broader topic about, you know, the wild-eyed idea of covering the Prospect Expressway. I mean, I want to point out, I think some of us on this board were interviewed in 2018 by NYU Wagner graduate students who produced a report that's still published online that did a very thorough assessment of the Prospect Expressway and surrounding conditions, with very specific proposals about either creating a grade level boulevard treatment or capping it. And you know, we have precedent in our area, you know, with the Bay Ridge Towers of capping and building, so it's done. And recall that the MTA floated an RFP to cover up the rail cut down by 62nd Street not too long ago, you know, wanting to go open market on that to cover it up. So, you know, if we can build a high line and remove a highway in the Bronx and build a train line from Brooklyn to Queens prospectively on the governor's new notes and things like that, it might be a decade or more process. But, it is possible, and people have given it some serious thought. And so I just want to leave that idea. There's also been recent sort of spot designation. LPC did designate the doctor's house on 44th Avenue on the Quick. Remember, that was just a year or so ago. So, there are some things at play. This building may have slipped through our fingers, but, there are means short of landmark districts and that whole requirement to preserve specific things that have high value to the community or high potential as community use.
Nice. Well, just that, David, makes me really excited that I'm on this call to find out that some grad students put together a report. So any contact information would be
that was
fabulous.
sponsored out of the then Borough President's office. It's not a book report. I mean, it's a pretty substantial analysis, and it's a good read. It's out there. You'll find it on Streets blog or one of the archives.
Okay, yeah, I'm definitely looking for that, and specifically who those grad students were. So I will do my best to find that. That's very exciting to me. Thank you.
Actually, it does remind me that, often developers will go ahead and start a process or even build a building. We have our experience, as Karen knows very intimately, our issue on 15th Street, where two developers on 2 blocks across 15th Street built 2 condo towers. And then, Department of Homeland Services came in and bought both buildings, right? That there's a situation where a public agency essentially, paid, I guess, market value for 2 recently completed buildings for a public purpose. It also reminds me of essentially the school in the old precinct that's diagonally across from the community board. That was bought by a developer, and they were going to start construction, or they had a plan for it, but then SCA came and bought that site for a new school, primarily because they wanted to twin it to the new school the preschool that they opened up across the street next to St. Michael's. So I actually don't think, following on what David said, maybe it's not even just MTA, but it could be, it could be a school site. If Joan's still on the line here, Joan Body is our site selection committee chair. We're constantly looking for sites for either new schools or large parcels for, in this case, maybe housing. But there are agencies that are willing to pay market prices for land, because again, we're not making new land in Brooklyn in our district. So any space that comes available, agencies may be interested in it. Now, I don't know, obviously it's such a huge site, and the money that they paid may be, a lot. But it could be that SCA says there's nowhere else to build a new high school, and that site must be big enough for a new high school. So they'll swoop in, they've got money. They may be willing to reimburse Regis for his costs and a little profit to get the site, because there's no other place in the district to build something that big.
Nice. Well, Prospect Expressway looks like it could be easily capped compared to some other things, perhaps. Maybe halfway between 4th and 5th, all the way between 5th and 6th, and all the way between 6th and 7th. So that's inventing some new property, and you either buy it or build it. And I'm excited to continue this quest.
All right. So I'm going to leave it there. Jim, thank you so much for coming in tonight and talking with us. We'll bring this up next week at the full board meeting, and hopefully maybe we'll hear some more ideas. But I think certainly we can put together a letter that recognizes the cultural history of the site and the importance to the community.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Anything else from the committee? Any new business? Not seeing any. I release you for the rest of the evening. Enjoy the gift of time. 9 minutes to 8 o'clock.
Thanks, John.
And
Thank you.
thank you all for attending, and we'll see you next
Thank you
week.
all.
Night all.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Good night, everyone.